Alright, this is my video for Showtime. For today's lesson, I plan to teach my students about the contributions of the Founding Fathers, as well as identify some of the purposes of the preamble, as well as the Constitution. Some of the key concepts would be understanding the separation of powers, the system of checks and balances, what a veto is, and identifying the three and describing the three branches of government. The first question is, what was the intent or purpose of using the hook you've selected? Well, for the hook, what I had decided to do was having the kids stand on either side depending on whether they agree or disagree with the following statement, which is, all rules are good and therefore they should be obeyed. The reason for doing this is not only so that the kids could get up, but also, I guess you would say, it makes the lesson more interactive and it gets them want to be involved. And once the second component of this lesson is that once the kids have gone to their respective sides, I will ask each side, several of the students, why they chose or adopted a particular position. At the end of it, of course, the students will be given an opportunity to show me whether or not they want to retain their position or they want to change their position. I suppose part of it was motivated by the fact that in our module that we were taught, rather surprising, that one of the things people like most is conflict, which sounds quite paradoxical because it's something typically people run away from in a person-to-person environment. The second question is, how do you plan to use a strategy to teach language? Well, for the ways of teaching language, I thought of using the Frere model. I would, instead of asking the kids to memorize a term, which is often the case, I think it would be better that they learn to think critically about the subject, in that, yes, they have the vocab term, as you can see here in the middle. They provide a definition. Obviously, it would be in their own words, preferably. They would draw it out. Okay. They would provide some examples and some non-examples. It seems that when children, they're not able to retain a particular definition, when they have an illustration, especially one that they come up with on their own, it seems that they're more likely to recall what that illustration is, and then from there be able to abstract a particular definition. And then providing examples as well as non-examples gives students the opportunity to apply the concept in a particular way, as well as a non-example. In other words, trying to distinguish what something is and what it is not. The third question is, why did you use your planned single or multiple strategies for success? And my answer to that is, during my lesson, I proposed to use all three learning styles to emphasize and re-emphasize one of the most critical parts of my lesson, which was to teach the students the three branches of government, as well as what their powers are, and as well as how they check one another. For the visual component, I thought that we could create an anchor chart, which delineates basically each of the branches of government, what their powers are, and then on the sides explaining how each one checks the other from becoming too powerful. Okay. For the auditory, I found a short 4-minute video basically describing it for them and what the purpose behind it, creating it, was for the founding fathers. And then for the kinesthetics, I thought it would be appropriate if the kids were able to actually go through the process, let's say, of creating a bill and how it would become law. And in so doing, they would there would be certain groups, obviously within the executive, others within the judicial, and others within the legislative. And then, how would I monitor students' learning? I think I would monitor students in various ways throughout the lesson, but also one of the key ways would be indirectly through the activities we perform, such as the one I mentioned previously, to see making sure they understand the mechanics of how the government works, obviously in a basic way. And then share why you showed the closure of activity. Well, for the closure of my activity, I chose to use a Kahoot program. They would be provided tablets, and they would be able to access the program themselves. And more than anything, it would just to make sure that they understand what the concepts are. I would ask them questions surrounding what the fears were of the founding fathers when attempting to create a new government, what the responsibilities of the three branches of government are, what those three branches are, obviously, as well as each of them demonstrating in at least one way in which each of the branches check on one another. And then the last question would be is how will you know if your students learn the desired objective? I wrote here, as a teacher, I will know if my students learned based on how they responded to each of the Kahoot questions, as well as how they performed in the class activities that they carried out. I will also question the students throughout the lecture, whether or not they understood each of the concepts, also asking them higher order questions so that they can think a little more critically about it, as opposed to being, I guess you'd say, content with a superficial understanding of the topic. And these subtle checks will help me to determine whether or not they learned the particular concept.